before life ever placed its weight on your shoulders, before disappointment ever found your address, before pain ever learned your name, there was already a decision made about you in heaven. Before you took your first breath, before anyone spoke words over you, good or bad, God had already spoken. You are not an accident. You are not random. You are not a mistake, and you are not here by coincidence. You did not simply appear on this earth to wander aimlessly, hoping to eventually discover meaning. No. You were sent. You were known. You were chosen. Long before life tried to redefine you, God had already defined you. Long before trauma tried to shape you, God had already formed you. Long before survival became your personality, purpose was your identity. Somewhere along the journey of life, many of us began to forget that truth. Life has a way of pressing on you. It has a way of teaching you lessons you never signed up to learn. It has a way of convincing you that who you had to become in order to survive is who you actually are. But survival and identity are not the same thing. Survival is what you do to make it through. Identity is who God created you to be. Survival adapts. Identity originates. Survival reacts. Identity is intentional. And sometimes, without even realizing it, you begin to confuse the person you became to survive with the person God sent you to be. The Bible reveals a powerful truth in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, where God says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you." Notice what God is saying. He did not say, "After you figured everything out, I knew you." He did not say, "After you proved yourself, I chose you." He said, "Before." Before formation, there was knowledge. Before birth, there was purpose. Before performance, there was identity. That means your worth was never dependent on your success. Your purpose was never dependent on your perfection. Your calling was never dependent on your circumstances. God decided who you were before life ever tried to convince you otherwise. But life has a voice too. Pain speaks. Rejection speaks. Fear speaks. Failure speaks. And sometimes those voices become so loud that they drown out the voice of God. Pain teaches you to guard yourself. Rejection teaches you to hide yourself. Fear teaches you to limit yourself. And failure teaches you to doubt that you were ever capable in the first place. You start building walls, not because God called you to isolation, but because vulnerability once cost you safety. You learn to be strong, not because God called you to carry everything alone, but because you felt like weakness was not an option. You learn to be quiet, not because God called you to silence, but because your voice was ignored, dismissed or punished. Over time, these adaptations become habits, these habits become patterns, and these patterns begin to look like personality. But just because something became normal does not mean it was original. Just because something became familiar does not mean it was who God sent you to be. There is a difference between formation and distortion. God forms. Life distorts. God builds. Life pressures. God calls. Life convinces. And if you are not careful, you can spend years living as someone life shaped instead of someone God sent. From the very beginning, God created humanity with intention. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion." Dominion means authority. It means stewardship. It means representation. That means you were created to reflect God, to carry His nature, His character, and His authority into the earth. You were not created to live in fear. You were not created to live in shame. You were not created to live in constant doubt about your value. You were created to walk in alignment with the one who made you. But the moment deception enters, identity begins to shift. In Genesis chapter 3, the serpent asked a simple question. Has God really said? That question planted doubt. And doubt has a way of weakening alignment. Because once you begin to question what God said, you begin to question who God said you are. And once identity becomes uncertain, behavior begins to follow confusion. Adam, who was created to walk in authority, began to walk in fear. Adam, who was created to live in openness with God, began to hide. His location had not changed, but his alignment had. When God asked Adam, "Where are you?" God was not asking for information. God was inviting reflection. He was asking Adam to recognize that he was no longer showing up as who he was sent to be. And that same question echoes today, not as condemnation, but as invitation. Where are you? Not physically, but spiritually. Not geographically, but internally. Are you showing up as who God sent you to be? Or are you showing up as who life convinced you that you are? Because those two versions are often very different. One is rooted in purpose. The other is rooted in pain. One is rooted in truth. The other is rooted in experience. The danger is not just pain itself, but the identities we build around pain. You can begin to call your coping mechanisms your character. You can begin to call your defense mechanisms your personality. You can begin to believe that your limitations are permanent, when in reality they were only temporary responses to temporary situations. But God never called you to live permanently in survival mode. Survival keeps you alive, but alignment brings you to life. Throughout Scripture, we see example after example of people who had to rediscover who God sent them to be. Moses is one of the clearest examples. Moses was sent as a deliverer, but life tried to convince him he was disqualified. He was born under a death sentence. He was raised in a system that conflicted with his identity. He made mistakes. He ran away. He lived in hiding. By the time God called him to step into his purpose, Moses did not see himself as capable. He saw himself as inadequate. He said he was slow of speech. He said he was not qualified. He saw his weakness as the end of his story. But God saw his weakness as the place where his strength would be revealed. God did not deny Moses' feelings. He redirected his focus. He reminded Moses that the source of his calling was not his ability, but God's authority. Because when God sends you, He also sustains you. When God calls you, He also equips you. When God appoints you, He also empowers you. Your calling was never dependent on your perfection. It was dependent on His presence. Jesus Himself is the ultimate example of someone who never allowed life to redefine Him. He was rejected, misunderstood, betrayed, and crucified. But none of those experiences changed His identity. He never forgot who He was. He never forgot why He came. He never allowed temporary circumstances to redefine eternal purpose. He stayed anchored. He stayed aligned. He stayed obedient. And that is the invitation for you today: to return, to realign, to remember, to stop seeing yourself only through the lens of what happened to you, and begin seeing yourself through the lens of who God created you to be. Because pain may have shaped parts of your behavior, but it never had the authority to redefine your identity. Failure may have interrupted your progress, but it never had the authority to cancel your purpose. Fear may have delayed your steps, but it never had the authority to rewrite your destiny. God still knows who He sent when He sent you. He has not forgotten. Your purpose is not lost. Your identity is not erased. Your calling is not cancelled. It may be buried under layers of pain, disappointment, and survival, but it is still there, waiting, calling, inviting you to step back into alignment. The journey back begins with hearing His voice again, because identity is not discovered through performance. It is revealed through relationship. When you draw close to God, clarity begins to return. When you listen, direction begins to form. When you trust, courage begins to rise. And slowly you begin to shed the versions of yourself that were built from fear and step into the version of yourself that was built from purpose. You were never meant to live defined by your worst moments. You were never meant to live confined by your deepest wounds. You were meant to live aligned with heaven's decision about you. You were meant to live as someone sent, someone chosen, someone known. And today can be the day you begin to show up as that person again. Not perfectly, not all at once, but intentionally, step by step, decision by decision, alignment by alignment. Because before life ever touched you, God already chose you. Before pain ever spoke to you, God already named you. Before fear ever limited you, God already called you. And nothing life has done can undo what heaven has decided. Before there was a single moment of your life recorded in time, before there was a memory you could recall, before there was a success you could celebrate or a mistake you could regret, there was already a decision made about you in eternity. You were not created as an afterthought. You were not assembled randomly. You were not sent here without intention. Heaven did not hesitate when it came to you. Heaven did not guess when it came to you. Heaven decided. There is something powerful about understanding that word, decided, because a decision removes uncertainty. A decision removes randomness. A decision establishes intention. And when God decided to create you, He did so with full knowledge of every moment you would experience. He knew the environments you would grow up in. He knew the people you would encounter. He knew the moments that would build you and the moments that would break you. He knew the doors that would open and the doors that would close. And yet, knowing all of that, He still chose to send you. That means nothing about your life has caught God by surprise. Nothing about your pain has shocked Him. Nothing about your failures has disqualified you in His eyes. Because His decision about you was never based on your perfection. His decision about you was based on His purpose. But life has a way of making you forget that. Life has a way of convincing you that you are simply the product of what happened to you. It teaches you to define yourself by your experiences instead of by your Creator. If you were rejected, life tries to convince you that you are unworthy. If you failed, life tries to convince you that you are incapable. If you were overlooked, life tries to convince you that you are insignificant. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to accept labels that God never gave you. You begin to introduce yourself through your pain. You begin to see yourself through your disappointments. You begin to measure your future through the lens of your past. And the most dangerous part is not the pain itself. The most dangerous part is the identity you build around the pain. Because pain can become a filter. And when pain becomes a filter, everything you see, including yourself, becomes distorted. You stop seeing possibility. You stop seeing purpose. You stop seeing value. You start seeing limitation. You start seeing weakness. You start seeing reasons why you cannot become who God created you to be. But pain does not have creative authority. Pain can shape behavior, but it cannot define identity. Only God defines identity. Only God determines purpose. Only God establishes calling. And there is something the enemy hopes you never fully realize. He hopes you never fully realize that your current condition is not your final identity. He hopes you never fully realize that who you had to become to survive is not who you were created to remain. He hopes you stay trapped in survival mode because survival mode keeps you alive but prevents you from stepping fully into purpose. Survival mode teaches you to play small. Purpose calls you to rise. Survival mode teaches you to hide. Purpose calls you to be seen. Survival mode teaches you to protect yourself. Purpose calls you to trust God. There are people listening right now who have become experts at surviving. You know how to endure. You know how to push through. You know how to keep going even when you feel empty inside. You know how to smile even when you are hurting. You know how to function even when you are broken. But survival is not the same as alignment. Alignment is when your life begins to reflect heaven's intention for you. Alignment is when you stop living only in reaction to your past and begin living in response to God's voice. Alignment is when you stop asking, "What happened to me?" and start asking, "Who did God create me to be?" Because those are two very different questions. One keeps you focused on your wounds. The other keeps you focused on your purpose. And the truth is, many people never ask that second question. They spend their entire lives reacting instead of aligning. They spend their entire lives surviving instead of becoming. They spend their entire lives existing instead of living with intention. But God never called you just to exist. He called you to live. He called you to reflect Him. He called you to carry something into this world that nobody else can carry in the exact same way. You are not a duplicate. You are not a copy. You are an original creation with a specific assignment. There is something about you that reflects God in a way nobody else can replicate. Your voice, your perspective, your experiences, even your struggles, God can use all of it. But alignment requires surrender. Alignment requires trust. Alignment requires you to release the identities that were built out of fear and step into the identity that was built out of purpose. This is not always easy because fear feels familiar. Fear feels safe. Fear feels predictable. Purpose often feels uncomfortable. Purpose stretches you. Purpose calls you beyond what feels secure. But growth has never lived inside comfort. Growth lives in obedience. Growth lives in trust. Growth lives in the decision to move forward even when you do not feel fully ready. There will be moments when you question yourself. There will be moments when you doubt yourself. There will be moments when the voice of fear tries to convince you to retreat back into hiding. But you must remember that fear is not your author. God is. Fear did not create you. Fear did not call you. Fear did not assign you. Fear has no authority to define you. God does. And when God created you, He did not create weakness without purpose. He did not create limitation without intention. He did not create you to fail. He created you to fulfill something that only you can fulfill. Even your weaknesses can become places where God's strength is revealed. Even your past can become part of your testimony. Even your pain can become part of your purpose. Nothing is wasted in the hands of God. There are moments when you may feel behind, moments when you may feel like you missed your chance, moments when you may feel like it is too late. But God does not operate according to human timelines. He operates according to divine timing. He knows when to open doors. He knows when to prepare you. He knows when to position you. And sometimes preparation happens in hidden places. Sometimes preparation looks like isolation. Sometimes preparation looks like delay. Sometimes preparation looks like seasons where nothing seems to be happening. But just because nothing is visible does not mean nothing is happening. God often does His deepest work in hidden seasons. He builds your character. He strengthens your faith. He reshapes your thinking. Because where God is taking you requires you to become someone who can carry it. Purpose is not just about what you do. It is about who you become. And who you become is shaped by what you believe. If you believe you are unworthy, you will hesitate. If you believe you are incapable, you will retreat. But if you believe that God has called you, chosen you, and equipped you, you will begin to move with confidence. Not confidence in yourself alone, but confidence in the one who sent you. Because ultimately, your life is not sustained by your strength. It is sustained by His grace. Grace meets you in your weakness. Grace meets you in your uncertainty. Grace meets you in your imperfection. Grace does not wait for you to become perfect. Grace empowers you as you are becoming. And as you continue walking with God, something begins to change. Your thinking begins to change. Your confidence begins to change. Your identity begins to realign. You stop seeing yourself only through the lens of your past. You start seeing yourself through the lens of God's promise. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is broken. You start seeing yourself as someone who is being rebuilt. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is lost. You start seeing yourself as someone who is being led. Because God is not finished with you. Your story is still being written. Your purpose is still unfolding. Your identity is still being revealed. There is more in you than you have seen. There is more in you than you have believed. There is more in you than you have experienced so far. And the same God who formed you is still forming you. The same God who called you is still calling you. The same God who started your story is faithful to complete it. So today, make the decision to stop agreeing with every lie that fear has told you. Make the decision to stop defining yourself by your lowest moments. Make the decision to return to alignment. Begin to see yourself the way God sees you. Begin to trust His voice above every other voice. Begin to move forward, even if the steps feel small. because every step of obedience brings you closer to becoming who you were sent to be. You are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are not too late. You are chosen. You are called. You are sent. And nothing life has done has the authority to cancel what God has decided about you. Walk in that truth. Live in that truth.